Canada has been the host to both Sicilians and Calabrians. And regarding the criminal element, Sicilian Cosa Nostra and the 'Ndrangheta. Canada's Sicilian Mafia was dominated by the Rizzuto family, once led by Niccolo Rizzuto, whose organization mainly ruled over Montreal. The Calabrians consisted of clans linked to the Saderno group, and back in the 1970s, the Calabrians were led by Vincenzo Controni, who, despite being a Sicilian himself, had a family which consisted mostly of Calabrians. The Saderno group is considered one of the 'Ndrangheta's most powerful, and who had a branch, a secondary hub based in Canada, specifically Montreal and Ontario. Paolo Violi, Controni's underboss, had major issues with Niccolo Rizzuto's growing power and influence in Canada's underworld. And this was the start of a conflict where the stage was split by Sicilians and Calabrians. The Calabrians began taking some heavy hits. High-ranking member Pietro Sciarra was killed on February 14, 1976, by members of the Rizzuto family. Francesco Violi, another high-ranking member of the Controni family and brother to its underboss, was killed on February 8, 1977. And on January 22, 1978, a Rizzuto hit team that Paolo Violi led into his house shot him multiple times and leaving him for dead on his living room floor, thus marked the end of the Calabrian dominance in Montreal. Following Violi's murder, the Saderno group effectively lost control of the Mafia in Canada. Naturally, they still remained powerful in Calabria, but the loss of Violi significantly diminished their international connections, which was extremely important to them for overseas investments and, more crucially, drug trafficking routes. Another reason Canada was essentially important to the Saderno group was that it allowed the clan to operate outside of Italian law enforcement. Back then, Canadian law enforcement was far less experienced in organized crime. The group concentrated on laundering money via Canadian banks, purchasing properties, which is the 'Ndrangheta's MO, putting illicit profits into legitimate businesses. They also created businesses such as construction, restaurants, and trucking, which were all used as fronts to generate legitimate income. Canada also served as a gateway for the clan's drug trafficking, drugs which came from Europe and South America. The Saderno group secured important routes in Italy and South America. Key distribution points for them in Canada was Hamilton, Ontario, and Toronto. In similar fashion, the Rizzuto family became a faction of the New York Bonanno family, basically their Sicilian counterparts. During the 1950s, Bonanno family boss, Joe Bonanno, sent Carmine Galante to Canada to act as his representative. Galante's role was to set up and protect Bonanno interests in the country. The Bonanno family was heavily involved in the drug trade, so Galante's visit was mostly drug trafficking related, organizing shipments through Canadian ports and things of that nature. And it was the very drug trade and control of it that became the primary reason for the conflict between the Sicilians and the Calabrians. Besides Paolo Violi, other key members of the Calabrian Saderno faction were systematically removed. Throughout the years, those same old grudges were inherited by new leaders of the Rizzuto family and the remnants of Canada's Saderno faction. For instance, from the 2000s up until about 2010, there was ongoing turf disputes and targeted hits, all aimed at the Rizzutos, who were trying to maintain control in Montreal. Also, according to an article written by Anna Sergi for I Calabresi, an online journal dated March 18, 2022, the decades-long conflict between the Calabrians and Sicilians have emerged with new players. She quotes a chief inspector of Quebec's police, Guy Lapointe. This is an old conflict that still persists between Sicilians and Calabrians in local organized crime. The Scopa brothers, Salvatore and Andrew led a Calabrian faction of the Mafia in Montreal from about 2014 till 2019. The brothers were naturally from Calabria and part of the Saderno group in Montreal. Informants gave Canadian law enforcement a detailed account of the Scopus plans to eliminate key Sicilian members and to take control over their operations. They were also targeting any allies of the Rizzuto family. However, they made the mistake of openly bragging about their intentions. On May 27, 2016, Rizzuto family underboss Rocco Sollicito was driving in his BMW SUV in Laval when he was boxed in and shot to death. His murder was part of a campaign by the Scopus against the Sicilians controlling Montreal. They also continued making moves by threatening their associates, as well as carrying out a few attempted hits that were unsuccessful. Nonetheless, the Sollicito hit was considered a major blow to the Rizzuto family and one they would get revenge for. On May 4, 2019, Salvatore Scopa was killed. 5 months later, on October 21, 2019, Andrew Scopa was also killed. Since the Scopa hits, there's been a power vacuum within the Montreal Mafia. The recent June 12, 2025 arrest of the Rizzuto leadership has caused further fragmentation in Montreal's underworld. While researching, I've found mention of small cells of Calabrians presently operating in Canada. The fact that the Rizzuto family, precisely its leadership, finds itself in disarray with the recent indictments can in fact lead for yet another power grab in Montreal. Historically, the Rizzuto's family's control has constantly been challenged. And if you think about it, it's come full circle for the Rizzuto family because their rise to power was the result of this conflict with the Calabrians. And now the Rizzuto family faces losing control again to the Calabrians or splinter groups who are close to them. If you haven't liked this video yet, please take the time now and give it a like, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Anyone who'd like to show their appreciation for videos like this, or more importantly, help me to continue making them, you can donate with the Super Thanks icon down below, or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Let me quickly mention my blog, also called Sit Down News, especially for those of you who still enjoy reading. The site can be found at sitdownnews.com and is a paid subscription. The history of these two criminal groups, in a land they made their own, is in fact a bloody one, full of vendettas and revenge. Basically, in this long war, the Calabrians were the losers to the Rizzutos, but they maintained their presence in Montreal as well as other areas of Canada. The 'Ndrangheta, as we have come to learn, is an extremely powerful organization, but they were limited to manpower in Canada. After all, it was a long way off from Calabria. The 'Ndrangheta has a cultural tradition to hold on to vendettas for decades. The long-running conflict between the Sicilians and the Calabrians is extremely unique and one that shaped the entire structure of Canadian organized crime.